Hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I am so excited about today's show because, you know, we've been hearing a lot about cannabis, especially during this pandemic. A lot of the news has been popping, especially last week. I think the entire internet and the social media world went nuts when, there's a study that came out of the University of Oregon that actually identified cannabis as a substance that might be able to affect COVID. We were looking at a couple of particular cannabinoids that, if utilized in their raw form, seem to inhibit the spike protein of the COVID virus from actually penetrating our cells. And so, in the course of about a week, I think that sales across the country kind of sparked a little bit and spiked a little bit around the world, based on the information that, consumption of some of the secondary cannabinoids may be more useful than some of the medications that the pharmaceutical companies have put out there right now. And we know that they will be at least, 1,000 times probably less expensive than some of the pharmaceutical industries medications that have been put out there to affect COVID. And so people are trying to figure out, well, I don't like to smoke, so how do I get some of these cannabinoids in my body? And well, there's several different ways and several different delivery systems, one of which is food. And my guest today is a culinary artist who has been preparing, gastronomical experiences for corporate leaders and celebrities and athletes and social influencers. Her international travels have enabled her to study under executive chefs from around the world. She's toured with DJ Khaled and curated dinners for celebrities such as Snoop Dogg and Dave Chappelle and, just world-renowned chef. So please welcome Chef Nikki Steward to Let's Be Blunt with Montel today. Chef, thanks so much for being a part of the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Montel. It's wonderful to be here.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's so crazy about it is that, I talk to people all the time. I've been a cannabis enthusiast now for well over 20 years and have suggested to lots of people that they consume. And, you think that it's just a known fact and people understand it, but people outside of the cannabis world don't really understand that you can literally utilize cannabis not only for taste purposes, but as a, additional ingredient in almost any food, and especially fat-based foods works extremely well in oil-based foods, but you can utilize this. And this is a delivery system that, though is slightly different, and so in some ways with some people, not all people, its effects on you from a psychological standpoint and a psychotropic standpoint can be different, but it could be easier on a lot of people who want to be able to consume, but have an aversion to smoking.
Very true. Very true. There's so many options when we're talking about delivery methods of cannabis and non-combustible forms of cannabis, which is clearly what I'm into, the non-combustible forms. And so I do a lot of things and I play around with different technologies, different levels of science, bioavailability, nanotech, using oil as a carrier. So there's so many levels to this that I enjoy explaining this to people when I'm cooking, when I'm having events or speaking. So yeah.
Well, let's get into some of those different levels, but let's do that kind of in a slower way.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about your background first. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Ohio. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm an Ohio State Buckeye.
Wow! And now, were you introduced to cannabis early in life, or what's your background, personal background with cannabis?
Oh, for sure. I was definitely a 15-year-old smoking weed in the park. Definitely, I
Right.
for sure was. But I had an interesting relationship in how I came into cannabis, as far as my first people that I can identify as consumers that were working and enjoying a professional life, which was really like my family. My father and I have a really wonderful relationship that some of it involved cannabis. My father does construction, and he used cannabis after work just to kind of resettle and readjust his body. because there's a lot of pain and a lot of work, and
Sure.
especially in construction. And
Yep.
then fast forward to after being in just a youth consuming cannabis. I went in to study pharmaceutical sales, not pharmaceutical sales, pharmaceutical science, and then went into
You did,
retail.
and you did it at Ohio State University.
I did at Ohio State. Yes, I did it at Ohio State. And I went into retail pharmacy and pharmaceutical sales after school.
And this is just non-cannabis pharmaceutical sales.
Non-cannabis. This is traditional medical,
Big
and
pharma.
yeah, and big pharma. I mean, I'm talking about your Mercks, your Pfizers, your super big pharma, and also working for CVS, working in just regular retail.
And
Um,
when did you decide to change that to the culinary world? I mean, did you go to school as a chef first and then decide to introduce cannabis into what you were doing, or was that all kind of symbiotically done at the same time?
it was very symbiotically done at the same time. I had a need to kind of explore what I felt was more traditional medical, more medicine woman vibes, if I could
Mhm.
explain that to you, more naturopath, more understanding the root and origin of medicines via the plant. And so in that self discovery, I took a sabbatical, just took a break from pharmaceutical in general, and decided I was just cooking, and I was cooking a lot. And some of my sorority sisters was like, "You really should cook." And I was like, "You sure?" They were like, "Yeah, you're pretty talented." So I just quit doing pharmacy and stuff altogether. Started studying culinary science. I never went to culinary school. I started from the bottom working with chefs just in a restaurant, and traveling the world just to understand flavor profiles and different techniques and things like that. So I really educated myself. To compare food and cooking is also, to me, to compare it to science, because it's ingredients, it's a list of things you got to put together to create something. So it all made sense to me.
And then when you first started cooking and adding cannabis to your recipes, were you doing it for personal use, or were you doing it to help other people, or were you
Yeah.
just like, experimenting?
Both. I was doing it for personal use. I have screwed myself over more times than I can I can explain. Just R&D, just doing a lot of R&D. And then I had a couple requests from clients to create edibles and different things that they can travel with. And so I started kind of playing around with different delivery methods and different techniques within the culinary space to make these things palatable, make them, visually acceptable, and not just your regular brownie that you experience in college.
Right, right, right. And
Yeah.
what did you find when you first started doing that? Were you like overdosing people, or were did you
Yeah.
hit a sweet spot? What happened?
I hit a sweet spot pretty good. So the great thing about me understanding dosing from a pharmaceutical perspective is me also understanding dosing when it comes to delivery and cannabis. And so there are a few times that I may have had some mishaps, but usually I just consume the mishaps personally.
Hmm.
Then I really was very meticulous in making sure that what I was making was dosed correctly per person, and also playing around with different levels of ratios of CBD and THC and one to ones and things like that.
Well, I mean, I've been in this space for now over 20 years,
Mhm.
and can remember way, way, way back when I first started, advocating for cannabis and speaking around the country about cannabis back in 2001.
Mhm.
I was personally, making a lot of edibles myself back before edibles were even vogue. And, I realized a couple of different things. When I made, first time I made some, cannabis kind of butter and oils, and I was also extracting using some, high alcohol content liquors. I literally started realizing, well, I'll blow myself up by this. I had a friend of mine who I'll never forget. Not a great baker myself, though I do cook. Um, I literally bought some off the shelf little cupcake mix, and I really, the first time I set about making some little, those little round cupcakes, infused them with, some of my gotcha butter back at the time. Um, I really wasn't really paying as much attention. I mean, I had a pretty high tolerance, and so I thought most people had a tolerance similar to mine. I realized I used to have a band at the time, and you know, it's so funny. I took some of these brownies to band practice one day, and one of the other people that was one of the musicians who I knew was a cannabis user. He was like, "Dude, I'll try one if you want to give me one." I said, "Yeah, I'll give him one."
Mhm.
Dude, only eat half of it first, sit on it for a good 20 minutes, and then you kind of will know what's going to happen for the next 20 minutes. And then if you feel like it, you can eat another quarter, but I wouldn't eat the whole thing, until maybe, and I'm talking about these little round.
Yeah.
I would not eat the whole thing for at least an hour and a half. I mean,
Yeah.
prep yourself. Make sure you know what you're doing. I'm having this
Yeah.
conversation in a room during a break. Didn't realize that the drummer who was in my band was listening to this conversation and thought, So I gave my friend the brownie, gave him not a brownie, gave him one of the cupcakes. I had like 4 or 5 in the bag. I put them back in my pocket, went back into the studio, and we started jamming and practicing, and you know, about I don't know, 25 minutes in, we started noticing that the drummer was like speeding up. I mean, every single song Homeboy was speeding it up. So we never go, man, stop, cut. What the hell's wrong with you, man? He was like, whoo, whoo, whoo. I said, what it I literally walked out of studio, went back into the little kitchen area, went in my pocket and realized there was two of them cupcakes missing.
Oh gosh.
So homeboy had gone into my pocket, taken out those cupcakes, little teeny cupcakes, eaten one to start, and then was sitting there while we were practicing, put in another one because he didn't it worked. All of a sudden, you're done because once it's in, you ain't getting it out. You ain't throwing it up. It's gonna be there until you ride it out. And we literally had to stop practice that day. I mean, literally, my band was going home, called his girlfriend. The girlfriend got freaked out, called the other person in the band to take him to the hospital. He's gonna die. I said, he's not gonna die.
You'll
They
be all
told
right.
me, he ain't dying. He's just high.
Yeah.
Took him to the hospital, went in the hospital, and it's an emergency room in New York. And the doctor came in and said, "What did you consume?" He said, "I think they gave me some heroin." Guy said, "You didn't know heroin." So what did you consume? So I ate these little cupcakes, and the other bandmates said there were cupcakes with some cannabis in it. And the doctor said, you got two choices. One is go home, go to bed, and sleep. The other one is stay here, and the clock starts ticking, and you're in the emergency room here in Manhattan. And I want you to say the clock starts at $2,700. My boy got in the car, went home, went to sleep. That's what you got to do. I tell people, once it's in you, it ain't coming out, right?
Yeah. No, it's not. And and I have a couple techniques that I use just to kind of make process it through your system a little bit faster. And I have a company that I also work with, a scientist. It's called Undo. It'll take your high down 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
And back in the day though, there wasn't that technology. Nobody was studying how to get unhigh
Right.
really quickly. I had to master it because of doing dinners and things like that. And speaking of dosing, I mean, like everybody's body is so different.
Everybody's metabolism is so different.
Metabolism is
What
so
you ate
different.
earlier in the day is so different.
Oh yeah, 100%. I can consume 200-300 milligrams and be fine. Honestly, I mean, high as a kite, but I'm fine. And some people,
I'm with you. There are several different. I won't throw out any brand names, but there's several different cannabis candy bars that are out there.
yeah,
And there was one of them that was very, very popular for quite a while, still is. And they had different levels of cannabis in them. And the one, I think it was 150 or 160, it was 150 milligrams in the big bar.
hmm
And I mean, I'm gonna tell you, I could bang out one of them in the morning and be good till 2 o'clock in the afternoon and eat
easily,
another half.
easily,
So,
yeah, easily, easily. I mean,
those are-
and understanding that because, like, literally, when I have events that are about 300 to 400 people. And this is all infused dinners. I mean, this is all like a coursed out 8 course dinner. Most of it is passed in like very petite, like amuse bouche size, very small.
right, right.
Um, but You
Tap
know, yeah, and as soon as people think they can handle it, they can't. So,
right. If you think, "Oh, I can handle another piece," you're wrong. That
yeah,
the
yeah, or
second
you see
your high
people
mind said that to you, you were already done.
you're done. You're toast. You're
Right,
toast. And
right,
so here I come. I become chef slash like nurse at a
right,
point in
right,
time, and I start to like have different techniques to bring people back. But part of that too is a different type of delivery system. With nanotech, it hits faster, but it bypasses your liver. Okay. And so you have it permeates differently. And so I can start moving things through your endocannabinoid system, through your bloodstream a little bit faster and push it in and out faster than back when I was just making brownies, cakes, cookies, and things like that.
sure, sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Now,
Definitely.
have you noticed? I mean, talk to me a little bit because there are several television shows they've come on and off there, and and again, I'm not a professional chef or cook, but I've noticed that too often, too many of these shows spend too much time spending too much time with the cannabinoids in the oven or being cooked to the point that you're cooking off probably 20 to 30% of its value anyway to begin with, especially when it comes to some of the secondary cannabinoids that we know have a much lower, evaporation point or a much lower
Mhm.
burn off point.
Yeah,
So, do you do a lot of infusing? You cook your meal and then you infuse after
post.
you let the temperature
Mhm.
come down? Is that what you do?
I do a lot of it post, yes. It
Right.
depends on. So I look at it a couple different ways. It depends on what the actual dish is and where I want the terpenes to sit.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times, like terpenes are like essential oils. So when you
Right.
heat them at a certain pace, a certain rate, the smell is on the nose at the top, and then on the bite, I want it to kind of dissipate by the time you chew it.
Hmm.
So oftentimes I use water soluble things that are you don't even it doesn't even have a terpene taste to it, but it also you don't need to use the heat, and
Right.
so you're able to get more full spectrum, and you're able to get different variances of like feelings when you're consuming it. But oftentimes, like decarboxylation, you can only decarb at a certain temperature.
Right.
And that's the old school way when you were just doing canna butter, and you put your weed in the oven and slow and low and decarb and then put it in the crock pot. Like that's the old way. But
Hmm.
yeah, there are oftentimes like I never suggest roasting something at 4 to 500 degrees or things like that. So oftentimes I go back over it once the food has gotten to a temp, at least 250 or below, and then I start to add the infusions, and then I also add terpene, like different modifications to the terpenes, like extracts. So,
Hmm. Do you use food grade or do you use, I'm sorry, food, other vegetable kind of grade terpenes, or do you use all strictly kind of hemp based or cannabis based terpenes?
well, if I'm doing infused food, yes, definitely, mainly hemp and cannabis-based terpenes that have been
Mhm.
extracted. Um, and it comes in such a very like the tiniest amount. It's like this big, but those
Right.
terpenes, just like where they're mic'd, a teeny micro amount creates a flavor burst, in food. So yeah,
Right.
that's what it goes.
And what are some of your favorite? Now you've traveled the world with a lot of different celebrities and you cook for a lot of different people. What are some of the favorite dishes that you cook?
Oh wow. I really love Asian food. Some
Mhm.
of I did some culinary studies in Thailand, and so really kind of get into like my bag of like broths. Like I love
Mhm.
broths. Broths are very simple yet complex because you think you just want to add like stock and like these things, but there's a layering that happens. And so when I infuse food, I like to make sure you're tasting the limonene, like the woodsiness and
Right.
the citrusness of the dish. But if you ask Dave Chappelle, his favorite thing that I make for him is what he calls smack and cheese.
Mhm.
And so it's infused mac and cheese. Like I'm known for that in most places in this country is mac and cheese or smack and cheese. He has this little bit where he tells his mom that he got high on mac and cheese. It's part of his stand up. And so and everybody's confused, like, how are you getting high as hell on mac and cheese?
Right.
Yeah, well, if Chef Nikki makes it, you're gonna get high because I usually use RSO in that mac and cheese.
Mhm, mhm.
But
Wow.
yeah, I mean, again, I love my personal favorites are ramens, fuzz, soup, things like that is my favorite thing to indulge in to make. But because I'm like client based, and do events, I pretty much switch menus every time I make something.
Well, how did you get introduced to celebrity circles when it comes to cooking for and preparing, cannabis foods for them?
Yeah, well, I had kind of been around in that space doing like tours, being a chef on tours, different like various like tours for rap artists and things like that, and celebrity events. I got connected to even Dave years ago. I just have a lot of people that's in even from college and family that's in entertainment and management, and so I realized a long time ago when I wanted to be a chef, I wanted to be able to have a cool job, not just be in a restaurant all the time. And I remember someone telling me there's a niche to feel for like celebrity events and different types of like private chef services. And so I immediately went into that after leaving restaurants because I was able to travel and see the world and, you know, study things in other countries too.
Wow, it's good. Well, now tell us about what is it, as you call it, your high end affair.
Behind the fair, yeah. So the Hind Affair started in 2018, but really it was like a progression of from an event that I did with Snoop. I did this very large launch party for Snoop, all infused food, like 250 people roughly. And I remember the company that dropped off the cannabis, they just dropped me off like maybe about, I don't know, like 5, 6 pounds of just straight flour for me to just break down.
Mm,
And I was like, what? Number one, that was way too much because I really only need like a QP of flour to get, not even really that, you know what I mean? But either way, so that was a continuation. I started the Hind Affair, which the purpose of it is to bring entertainers and to bring industry people in the cannabis space, farmers, processors, dispensary owners, all together, and to have this conversation. I also have a lot of politicians that come. I remember one of my first events, I was in Michigan, in Detroit specifically. and and someone came to me after the party and was like, yo, I just smoked a blunt with a senator. I have never imagined that in my life. And I
mm.
was like, yeah, well, that happens at the Hind Affair. And so I literally go from the top down to from the top, from the bottom, and I squeeze everyone together because we all have this commonality, which is cannabis, and we all love to eat. So, it's a really good conversation and it meshes really well. We're going on a tour this year, which our title sponsors, Weed Apps. So we're in like moving to 10 to 12 recreational cities doing these experiences and bringing people in. And every like folks show up. I mean, I remember my party in Oakland. I remember E40 coming in the door and was just like, I've been waiting to meet you. And I was like, E40? That's interesting. And then Green Day came. And I have this juxtaposition of people. And then Gary Payton was there. And then like all these other folks show up. And it ends up being this really cool thing because a lot of times you have athletes and entertainers and influencers that want to be connected to brands just to invest or to have a product and things like that. So all that stuff happens there.
And that's what's so unique about your events compared to others.
Very much unique. It is a very you have to register the questions. The registration questions are pretty intense because I want to understand the diner and their tolerance. There's no phones allowed. Everyone signs NDAs. It's pretty legit.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You don't want anybody videotaping, what
No,
happens to be that's right.
no. I
Mhm.
mean, because like I said, that example I told you of having like politicians in there that consume, and they have every right to consume, but maybe they don't want everyone to see them.
Right, 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 right. So now, I mean, give us maybe you share with me one of your favorite recipes, or if you think that's
Oh,
okay.
sure. I can share with you one of my favorite recipes.
Sure.
Um, well, do you want a vegan recipe or do you want a regular?
Well, let's give me one vegan and give me one regular because I know
All
I
right,
got
I'll give you one
to
vegan and
food
one
on both sides.
regular.
Huh?
Okay, so we can go back to this recipe. I'm going to tell you is one of my favorite. It just ran in Popular Science magazine, which is a coconut lemongrass ramen. One of my favorite things to make, which is also vegan. Of course, you can add shrimp or chicken or something like that. Um, but essentially, what I like to do is I like to get my broth going with lemongrass, fresh lemongrass. You can also get frozen chopped lemongrass. Um, get that going with some vegan broth cubes, which my favorite brand is it's called Not Chicken. It's probably the best broth for vegans ever. And so I get that and I water and coconut milk, and then I start adding in ginger, and then I start adding in, like Thai basil, and there's like some other very like a lot of aromatics. And then on the veggie side, I add bok choy. I'll add enoki mushrooms, carrots. I'll also add, of course, cilantro, scallions. Sometimes I add broccoli. And so
Mhm.
that's a really good hearty recipe that I like to make.
By itself, yes.
Yes. And then if it's the flip side, I like red snapper a lot.
Right.
And so I like to do kind of a Caribbean like slash African esque like collab of flavors when it comes to red snapper. But of course, I like to I scale the fish, completely gut on the inside, stuff the fish with a lot of aromatics. But I marinate the skin of the fish for probably like 2 hours in coconut aminos. I use a little bit of sweet chili glaze, sweet chili sauce. I use a little bit of hoisin. And then I add in a little bit of jerk seasoning. This sounds like it's all over the place, but trust
Mm-mm,
me, it'll come
mm-mm,
together.
mm-mm.
And I add a little bit of jerk seasoning, and then I add a little bit of course, cumin, and I add some smoked paprika. I'll add just a little bit of tiny bit of like Berber spice. It just kind of gives it up a little punch a little bit. So I make this marinade, and then I either smoke the fish or I put it on the grill because I like grill marks. Yeah,
Wow.
and I
Then
like
you
the crispy skin.
then you add do you add extract on the top of that or do you
So what I usually do for that one is on the inside of the fish, what I'll use is a water soluble rosin. So when the fish comes out of the smoker or the oven or the grill, I'll literally go inside of it and I'll put a little bit of water soluble rosin in there and it'll just melt into the inside layer of the fish. And then that way it'll evenly distribute.
right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I find when I like to make fish and I'll infuse. I like whitefish, so I'll
Hmm.
take a whitefish and literally I will season it the way I like it. I put it in, I'll bake it first, then I will crisp it off a little bit with a little broiler on the top of that, and then while it's still sizzling, I like to bring it out and add little drops. Let it cool down a little bit more.
Yeah,
Put a couple more little
of
drops,
course.
and
Little
then
drop.
yeah, little drops, and then I figured out for me that, of course, because when it came out right off the broiler and I put it in,
Yeah.
I lost a little bit of that, the punch from it. But when I wait till it but I got flavor. Then wait for it to cool down a little bit, add a little bit more, then I put the punch back, and now I gotta watch out how many
Yes.
bites I take.
Right. So are you using like olive oil or using a tincture?
I use olive oil, and then what I'll do is if I've made my own butter or
Mhm.
if I have a oil, like I have my own brand of oil, that I will then add that to the top.
To the top.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Well, let it soak down. I'll let it soak down, I'll put a lid over the top of it, let it soak in, and then eat it. Yeah.
I love that, like the crispy skin
Yes.
with the oil. Man, that's
That's
yum.
that's on the that's on the other side. I'm a crispy skin person for
Yeah,
whether it be chicken or fish. I love this crispy skin.
I love crispy skin. I do, and usually at the end of the fish, I still add a little bit of like garnish at the top, maybe some
Mhm.
curled scallions or some cilantro, and I'll put a little drizzle from the pan. I'll make a sauce
Gotcha,
and put a little
gotcha.
drizzle over there. Yeah.
Now, are
Oh,
there any particular cultivars that you like, or does it really matter?
well, it just depends on the state.
Oh, yeah, yeah, we'll go to
Yeah,
the
it just depends on the state, 'cause I travel so much. I will tell you,
do you sample it first, smoke it first before you
and all
use
of
it in
that,
food? Yeah, gotcha.
all of that, because I also am a concentrate, y'all. I do a lot of dabs.
Got it.
So one of my favorite brands is 710 Labs.
Gotcha.
Period. Like, and Jaleel White is one of my good friends, so I'm always smoking is purple. So
Mhm,
always
mhm.
smoking that. But that's one of my favorite brands there. And Michigan, of course, I love Al Harrington's brand Viola. It's a great brand too. And then in Michigan, there's some heady heads in Michigan. I'm close, like being from Ohio, that Midwest connection that I
Mhm.
have outside of like University of Michigan and Ohio State. That's the only thing we don't agree but
Gotcha.
other than that, yeah, like there's a brand up there called Heavyweight Heads. Probably some of the best weed I've had in a long time.
Have you tried the Dosi Dough? That's the one that, Alicia
Yes,
teaches her. Yes?
yes, yes.
Yeah, I
Dosi Dough is good.
I've not eaten any of that yet, but I have literally I just tried some, every state's Dosi Dough is a little bit different. When I
Yeah,
was in, Maryland and got an opportunity to do some Dosi Dough, and I was really pleasantly surprised that.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely been pleasantly surprised. Lately, I feel like cannabis has gotten a lot smoother.
Mhm.
It's been like people are curating cannabis in certain spaces with a lot more love than I think they used to. A lot more tender care, a lot more mindfulness.
I
You
think it was your choices, the choices have gone through the roof, and now we're going back to basically the connoisseur kind of thing where people are starting to identify the fact, I'm sick and tired of just taking one hit and being blown away, and I can't move for an hour.
Yeah.
They're looking for things and I love the fact that you just said you do ratios a lot. I literally,
Mhm.
I think 12 years ago, introduced the idea of CBD, THC mixed together in different ratios to
Mhm.
elicit that different thing. Because we do know that CBD will help bring down a little bit of that anxiety. So if
Yeah,
you've got a really heavy hitting THC, you can kind of moderate that buzz and make it better, by mixing
yeah.
together.
You could definitely moderate it, a lot. I mean, using CBG,
Yes.
CBN, CBD, uh, what is it, the CVA?
Yeah, CBDA and C all the acid versions of them are way better, especially if you can add those just from a press, non-decarboxylated, you're getting some of the medicinal purposes out of it.
You're getting a lot of the medicinal purposes out of it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's really cool, like, just playing around with those things. I'm also, like, in the process of thinking and playing around with a lot of, putting THC and CBD with other medicinal things for
Absolutely.
acceleration. Yeah. It's been
Using
very
adaptogens. You're using adaptogens then, I guess, right?
I'm using a lot of adaptogens.
Yes.
I'm a part of my R&D and part of what the High and Fair does. We also incorporate a lot of adaptogens into the experience, um, and getting people to understand and ease into adaptogens. And I literally touch people in their heart space and explain to them, like, this is really your birthright. These medicines, these
Right.
things were readily available to you ancestrally, historically. Now they're, taking them and synthesizing them and regurgitating them to us. But let's go back to our natural forms.
Correct. The herbal form, we all know that herbs have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Why do we have to have something that's been fabricated in a laboratory to try to recreate
Why?
what our body can accept? And I've always been one of those believers that I'm not necessarily sure. Well, we know that you do not get the same reaction from a cellular level for some of this stuff that's synthesized in fake molecules.
You do not. You do not. And I'm on a regular. I was on a panel for Emerald Cup last month,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And we were talking about craft mushroom products.
Oh,
And
without a doubt.
yeah, and so I'm on that panel myself, a couple other scientists, a couple mycologists, and when there was a comment that was made about, you know, wouldn't it be great to have psilocybin without all of the effects? And I was like, yes, it would be, but you're also taking away the original purpose of the medicine.
Correct.
I
And
mean,
clearly it has effects that are extremely positive that nature gave it. Now, why
that
would you
nature
want
gave
to
it.
now destroy it and say, "Well, I want to give you some," it's crazy.
It's
But
very
we're also finding out that just like, science is starting to understand that, I think the numbers are somewhere around, depending on who you listen to, there are 70 primary cannabinoids, but there's probably about another 150 more. And we're way up there around the 250 mark when it comes to cannabinoids that we're starting to individually identify. The same thing is in mushrooms and different types of mushrooms. There are several different component parts in the hundreds that have
oh,
unbelievable effect on our body.
yeah, it's so amazing, and I'm grateful that we're all interested in this science, but I wish that they would teach us this stuff more, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, kids would, like, get taught in school, like, there's a whole chart of mushrooms and
Right.
what they do, and a whole chart of fungus and what that
Correct.
does, you know?
And there's some value to that fungus being in your body.
It's a value to that fungus being in your body. And I'm telling you, like, as I'm a parent of I have 3 children and, ranging from high school to college to grown. And,
Mhm.
I have children, 2 children, or 1 child that specifically suffers from depression, anxiety, like, intense, so as a mother, my daughter's like, "I need meds." I'm like, you probably don't need meds." I've been in the pharmaceutical space, so I know you don't need those meds, but let me try something else. And so I started incorporating CBD, THC, and adaptogens into her diet.
Right.
And homegirl is at Spelman doing just fine right now.
There you
you
go,
know?
yeah, 'cause, I
Yeah,
mean, honestly, that's probably all he needs is just we already know that because of the endocannabinoid system, and we will finally, in about 5 years, figure out that there's a system in our body that actually processes mushrooms the way our endocannabinoid system produces cannabinoids. There's something in our body that produces a similar chemical to what we get out of mushrooms, and it's something that in the last 100 years, because we've been processing food so much for the last 100 years, we've processed this out of our system. It's now
we
time to start
process it
processing
out
it
of our
back.
system. As I like to say, our conditioning has been reconditioned and conditioned again. um,
Correct.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, like, I have a lot of parents that hit me up about their kids having ADHD, autism, and all these things, and anxiety, depression, and they're wanting to experiment with adaptogen, and they're wanting to experiment with THC and CBD, and different, like, understanding that. So I have parents that are teaching themselves a lot about these things, and I have a kid that was nonverbal. Uh, had all kinds of different types of levels of autism in a way. But again, adaptogens, microdosing. And for me, that was like a whole broader spectrum and working with moms and mothers so their kids would be kind of back to normal because they're,
Absolutely. Hey, well, you nailed it. It's microdosing. People like we live in a society where if one is good, then three is better. Not necessarily. If one is good, maybe a half is better. Maybe
yeah,
a third is better. Maybe
yeah,
what we have to understand is what actually triggers the cells to respond to what it is you're putting in.
yeah, yeah. And microdosing is just like a little, it's just it's accumulation. And when people understand that concept of stacking and stacking and
Yes,
stacking and stacking and stacking, and then your neurotransmitters and your neural receptors are 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 increasing and gaining. Like there is this is kind of like your brain and your synapses is creating new neural highways.
absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
regenerating that stuff. So I like to, I explain this in these talks. When I have talks, I explain this to a lot of parents, like I said. And I think I'm very passionate about that because I have children that I have evidence of that they're fine.
Right.
Um, you know what I mean? And so that, so that's that. That
Very
does
good.
help me understanding that science, though.
Sure. Anything exciting? What's coming up in 2022 for you?
Man, 2022 is going to be really fun. I have let's see, we've got the High and Fair tour um, going to all recreational markets. So that'll be coming to a city near you. And then we also have various events that we're doing with a lot of athletes. We have Super Bowl and NBA All Star coming up that we're doing with the athletes in cannabis. So I have a segment of the High and Fair called the pregame, which focuses on athletes from any sport. that either have a brand or connected to a brand that are willing to advocate and talk about that. So, right next month, Calvin Johnson and I are going to be doing some stuff together. Um, and so I've got that. I'm doing my first Hind Affair in South Africa this year. I'm very
Congratulations.
excited about that.
Very interesting. I literally am involved with one of the South African companies, well, Lesotho company, that is moving forward an initiative in cannabis right now. I've been involved with them for like the
Wow.
last 6 months. I'm on a board of them. It's called Afro Helios. So when you're down there, you
Okay.
can ask around and find out about it.
Yeah, I would love to get more information on that for sure.
Well,
They're allowing me to do a product launch.
a lot of people don't know and don't understand is that, as we sat here in America for the last 400 years thinking that we're the ones who were, the biggest distributors of cannabis in the world, not true. Africa has been consuming cannabis for thousands of years.
Thousands of years. That's where the land race comes from. And the strain
Correct.
hunters, they go there and they get some of the, top-notch strains and bring them back to here. You know what
Correct.
I mean?
Absolutely.
But yeah, so that'll be my first time. I got invited by the Indigenous Council of Elders to meet with them about what does the future look like for decriminalizing and also legalizing adaptogens, psychedelics, and different types of, like in cannabis, whether it's edible or smokables.
Right.
I'll be doing that this year, and like I said, they're allowing me to do a product launch, like a soft product launch, in September. So I'm very excited.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you. I
Absolutely.
never imagined I would have cannabis products in Africa, but
There you go.
here we go.
Hopefully, I might be there on the shelf space beside you here in the
Come
next year.
on now, come on
Looking forward
now,
to it. Absolutely.
side by
Absolutely.
side. So yeah, I've got some cool things. Of course, I always have stuff with Dave. I'm with Dave pretty much, in and out through the year, so doing work
Sure
with him.
thing.
Mhm.
Well, look, I mean, if anybody wanted to reach out to you and get a hold of you and get some advice on, recipes and other things, where would they go?
You could catch me anywhere on the internet at thechefnikki.com or on Instagram, on Twitter, or on Facebook. That is my website, and it's pretty much uniform throughout. And that's you'll find me there. That's pretty much it. Now, and I'm like I said, I'm with Weed Maps, so you can catch some information about me and the Hind Affair through the Weed Maps platform as well.
Wow, my goodness. Well,
Yeah,
thank you
and
so much.
Bon Appetit magazine.
What's
I've been
that?
Bon Appetit for 420.
What magazine is that again?
Bon Appetit magazine.
Appetit.
Yeah. Hey,
Hey, congratulations.
thank you.
Big time. Absolutely. So I'll make sure my viewers reach out and try to get a copy of it and read up. Okay.
Absolutely. That would be
You,
wonderful. I appreciate you.
you always have a home here whenever you want.
Yes.
I really appreciate you being a part of the show today, and I know our viewers appreciate you too. So I'm out of time, but I got to thank you so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt. Make sure you tune into the next edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.